Hello and welcome back to Anna Rose Reads the podcast. I am your host Anna and welcome back to another bonus episode Thursday. I am ecstatic to be able to share this episode with you all. I get to chat with Catherine Dang, who is the author of What Hunger, one of my most favorite novels that I've read this year, if not ever, really. I freaking love that book. If you've read it, you probably know why. And if you haven't, you need to pick it up and you need to read it. It's an incredible book that's got coming of age themes, cannibalism. I mean, who doesn't love that? Rage. It's just got something for everybody, in my opinion. So without further ado, here is my conversation with the author of What Hunger, Catherine Dang. Hello, Kat. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. I am thrilled to have you on the podcast today. Your novel, What Hunger, came out earlier this year, and it was so stunning. It is exactly my kind of book. But if my listeners are not aware of you and what you do you want to briefly introduce yourself?
Sure. Okay, so I think my official bio is Catherine Dang is the author of the novels Nice Girls and What Hunger, a graduate of the University of Minnesota. She currently lives in Brooklyn, New York. And that really does about sum it up.
That's awesome. I love it. And so What Hunger came out earlier this year, like I said, and it's a novel that kind of straddles a lot of genre lines, I think. It's got some horror elements because I am a horror reader, so there's that kind of thing there. There's contemporary fiction, there's, the speculative fiction. There's all kinds of things, at work, right? And I
Mhm.
think it's just such an incredible novel. Do you want to go ahead and briefly introduce the plot of What Hunger? I'm always afraid I'm going to spoil if I do it, so I like the authors to introduce the book themselves.
Yeah, of course. Okay, how do I do it without spoiling it? What Hunger follows a 14-year-old Vietnamese American teenager named Veronica Nguyen. It's the summer before high school. Her brother's going off to college, and she senses that there's a lot of change in the air. But after a very tragic summer, um, and some other tragedies, she develops a taste for raw meat and flesh.
And
And
if
yay,
that doesn't grab you,
cannibalism.
yeah, I'll say if that doesn't grab your attention, I don't know what will. Um, so yeah, that's a very great summary without giving too much away, I'd say. And I want to open up the floor for you to kind of just talk about where this novel started for you. Like, what was the point of inspiration and how did this whole thing begin for you?
Ooh, okay. So if you ask any author what they were doing during COVID, everyone has their own COVID book. This is my COVID book. Um, so my first novel had been sold and we were getting ready to publish it in like 2021, but 2020 COVID hit. I was stuck at home in Minnesota, hunkering at home with my parents. Um, I'm slightly like a hypochondriac. So I had these fears like, oh my God, if COVID kills us, what's going to be left of us? And for some reason, I thought about my mom's cooking and I was like, her food is the best. She's an amazing cook. But I wanted to preserve her recipes in case, anything happens to us. And I guess that was my way of self-soothing during COVID.
Yeah.
And it was also a good way for me and my mom to bond. Because like as she's cooking and as I'm like furiously trying to write down her recipes, we would just talk about anything. A lot of celebrity gossip, the news, family gossip. But I think one day, I swear my mom was chopping meat and I think we were talking about the Kardashians. And then my mom's like, did I ever tell you the story about the Vietnamese refugee who ate the other refugees? And I was like, Mom, what is this? Like, where did this come from? And my mom is very much, she hates horror. She hates
Yeah.
violence. She hates action movies. She hates anything bloody and mean and violent. And yet she's the one who tells me about this like casual cannibal story that she picked up in the Vietnamese refugee camps in the Philippines. And the story she heard was that a ship of Vietnamese refugees had crash landed onto this empty island in the Philippines. There was no food around, and one survivor just killed the other survivors and then ate them to live. And then the Filipino Navy found this person, picked them up, and tried to return them to the Vietnamese communists. The communists didn't want them. The Filipinos army also did not want them. So I guess the the cannibal was just put in a prison camp and just like, we'll just leave him here. If he dies, cool. But this is the story that my mom heard, and she's just casually spilling this to me. Like it's just like more celebrity gossip. So that was what was, I don't know. It was such a gnarly story coming from my mom, something so unexpected. But also back in 2020, I was trying to work on my second novel. I was getting nowhere. I was trying to write another mystery thriller, and I was so uninspired, and I was afraid that my first novel was it. I was going to be a one-hit wonder, and that's all. Um, but yeah, my mom brings up this cannibal story, and all of a sudden I can instantly picture this novel in my head. I've always wanted to write, a horror novel. I've always wanted to write something that reflects my own Vietnamese family history. And I love a good coming of age novel. But I guess in my mind, these were three different projects in my future. But as soon as my mom told me this cannibal story, all of a sudden, all three of these things it just came together in one project. And that's how What Hunger started. All thanks to my mother.
That is so incredible. This is like one of the best like inspiration stories that I've heard, I think. I have to ask, so like I see where that her telling you that story is jarring for so many reasons. One, if it was very casual, there's that nature of it, and then knowing her and her being like horror adverse, violence averse, and then just dropping this
Mhm.
insane kind of like lore, so to speak, like this tale. Um, but it's so interesting that you kind of set it within the context of this quality time with her, with learning how to cook and like preserving this part of your life, like this part of you, essentially, right? I have to
Mhm.
ask though, is your mom somebody who just is like, I'll just like eyeball it. I'll just like throw in however much as, because I imagine that was hell for you trying to
I was
catalog.
trying so hard. Oh my gosh, it's like my mom's trying to cook and she's like, you add a little bit of salt in here, a little bit of fish sauce. And I'm like, Mom, can you give me like a measurement? My mom has no idea what a teaspoon or a tablespoon is. She's always like, just a sprinkle, a good amount from your fingers. And it's maddening. I think these recipes that I wrote down are, I'm not gonna say they're bad recipes, but they're definitely like questionable. You need to be my mom to be able to cook these recipes.
Well, there's something so special about that though. Like I'm from South Louisiana, I'm Cajun, and so like a lot of
Oh
our
my gosh.
recipes are the same way. Like if I go ask my grandma like, "Hey, how did you make that?" She's like, just, eyeball it, like, whatever." And I'm like, "Okay, but you can't tell me that." And then like it never really comes out the same way twice, right? And I think it's
No.
so there's something that's so interesting to me about like carrying on and preserving that tradition and also like how it relates to creativity. I feel like there's like
Mhm.
connective tissue there. But I think that it's so interesting that your point of inspiration for this novel is wrapped up in that.
Yeah, I literally I will say as soon as my parents found out that I was getting published with my first book, my dad was very much like, I want to pitch you ideas. I want to be the inspiration for a novel. And he was the one like throwing all these ideas at me. And my mom's just like quiet in the background, just chilling. And then she's the one that drops the whole inspiration for What Hunger.
That's
The irony
incredible.
there.
I love it. I love it so freaking much. Okay. But to step away from that and to actually get to the book and what goes on in the book, this story, there's, you kind of mentioned how you felt like it was three separate things that kind of came into one between the coming of age themes, kind of like the horror-ish or like the violent-ish, themes, and then obviously everything else. So I think for me, there's a part of this book with Ronnie, her name's Veronica, but she goes by Ronnie.
Mhm.
She is such an interesting character to me, and to be able to like live in her head for the space of this book was one of the coolest things because everything around her, her perspective is so unique, and a lot of it when we meet her is through the lens of her older brother and everything that transpires between them and that fateful summer. And there's a feeling of not really belonging for Ronnie that permeates a lot of places. One, because she's too young to work during the summer, so she's just like stuck at home with her brother. And then two,
Mhm.
she knows he's about to leave, so she knows something's going to give soon with the household dynamic. And then on top of that, you bring up something really cool that I hadn't really considered, I think. And it's that how Ronnie talks about her otherness even to her own family because
Mhm.
she is considered an American child compared to their, Vietnameseness. So I just wanted to talk about that space of other for that summer, how it sets everything up to kind of fall the way that it does, and what writing from that place of other felt like for you.
Ooh, that is a really good question. I think people have definitely been seeing this theme of like belonging versus otherness. Um, and I don't know, I think it's something that I have felt a
Hmm.
lot as a child growing up. Um, because a lot of Ronnie's like distance that she feels with her family is how I have felt with my parents growing up. And the feedback I hear from other readers who are children of immigrants, they also say that it's a very similar feeling. So I'm glad that it resonates with people, and I'm glad that people can pull that out and feel it. I have felt like an other in every single place. Like even if I'm with a group of friends, sometimes I'm like, am I really here?
Yeah.
Like what is my place here? Um, and yeah, I don't know.
I feel like
There's
there's like a feeling of girlhood too that feels that way, right? Like
yeah.
of being a girl kind of like coming into your own, especially because, like Tommy, her brother, is such like an influence in her life.
Hmm.
I think she's trying to figure out her role compared to him. But like I remember
Hmm.
being a teenager and being like, I don't know where I'm gonna end up. Like I don't know
Yeah.
where this is all going for me. And I think that you
Hmm.
really tapped into that within like the first couple of chapters before anything really transpires. And I think it's a unique place to take in this story is like from this place of other, if that makes sense.
I do think that like that age of adolescence, that is probably when a lot of people start to feel like, am I the other or am I part of the in-group? What do I do to be part of the in-group? Or why am I the other? Because you don't feel it as much as when you're in a high school cafeteria and you see people at different tables and you're just wondering like, do I fit in at this table? Do I belong at this table? Um, I do think that this feeling of isolation and belonging is very tied to just adolescence in general.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think it's a good age to write about all of these themes.
Yeah, that's very true. And there's another component that I won't spoil as to how it comes about, but you write about grief with this novel in a way that I don't know that I've quite read. Like it really, I've read novels that have made me feel like it was a gut punch, right? Like it took me off guard. But I think the way seeing each member of the family kind of interacted with grief or their relationship with grief or they partook in grief was
Hmm.
super, super interesting. And I just wanted to see if you could like comment on what each family member's relationship with grief looked like for you and kind of like how you landed on how they would behave in light of this tragedy, without saying what the tragedy is.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So I think for Ronnie's parents, um, I definitely wrote her father as kind of a stricter, um, more conservative type figure. And I feel with men in general, when they're grieving, they don't really show it outwardly. They tend to, either bottle it up or direct their attention to something else. Ronnie's dad gets super into alcohol and just working a lot, avoiding the house. Um, I think for her mother's grief is, I don't know, I feel like it's something that I wish I could, how do I say this? The mom's reaction is how I think most people, including myself, wish we could react,
Hmm.
where we just bottle up ourselves from the rest of the world, just stay in bed, curled up, just, you know, being in the middle of all this pain and grief. Um, but I think for most people, when we go through grief, there's like a weird time limit where it's like, oh, you get this day to mourn, it's the funeral, but now you got to go back to work. Now you got to go back to school. You have to go back to your obligations and your job and whatever it is you're doing. And people are forced to carry on. But I don't know. I think people cope in different ways. Um, Her mother copes in isolation. Her father copes in alcohol. And I think Ronnie herself copes in rebellion and just pushing the limits and yeah, finding this joy in tasting raw meat and other kinds of meat.
Yeah, I feel like she very much leans, she like fights or rebels against the convention, like you said, of like having to continue, of having to go back to school or like having, that normalcy. And I
Hmm.
think that her her inclination for raw meat is just like another real signifier of that, right?
Hmm.
And I think that the way that you kind of introduce this like idea for her, like the first inclinations that she has, and there's a reason that she kind of discovers this that's really upsetting and tragic, but as
Hmm.
it as her fascination and her fixation on it kind of grows, it really felt like very seamless to me. Like I think sometimes when people think about stories about cannibalism, they're like, how the hell could you end up there? You know what I mean? But for
Yeah.
Ronnie, I was like, yeah, I get it. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know what that says about me that I'm like, yeah, I get it. But like that's how it felt for her, Like it just I related a lot to her anger, I think is what the thing is too. I think a lot of women probably relate to the injustices that we've felt and like we're like, yeah, we get it.
Yeah, honestly. Yeah, I'm glad that the rage, the female rage in the book is so, I don't know, it's easily felt and experienced by other people. I think there's also a layer of being like an Asian American woman. There are stereotypes about us being like very quiet, submissive, docile, which is crazy because like every single Vietnamese woman that I know in my family, they all have different personalities, but I would not fuck with any of them. Like they all scare me because I know that like they all have a spine, they all have a backbone, and if you push them a little too far, you're gonna fuck around and find out. Um,
I love that.
so I guess yeah, that kind of that anger was another way of showing off that like, yeah, there's multi-dimensional Asian American women, and just because we might look a certain way or act a certain way, it doesn't mean that there's not like a rage boiling underneath.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of my most like fist pump the air moments was you give her quite a few times that she gets her words in. Like she talks back or she acts back or she does whatever. And I'm like, yes, this was so I was like so rooting for her in those moments. I was like, yes, you do not need to take this shit. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Yes.
Um I think it was like it's some things that happened in the lunchroom or whatever, but in particular, like I think she's so bold and I really admire her for her boldness. What was it like to write a teen main character like that who is like she's pretty assured in her boldness. Like she doesn't really waver. And there's plenty of people like the school counselor is like, "Hey, are you okay? You are acting out." And she's like, "Nope, I'm good." She's very assured in her boldness. So I'm kind of curious how that felt to write her in that way.
Ooh, well, she is a fictional character, and I think there's a catharsis in writing about stuff that you wish you could have done.
Yeah.
Um, I think for most of my life, I've been very, not passive, but I have chosen the more convenient, more docile, more socially acceptable choice each and every time. I have walked away from conversations where, I'm thinking like, I should have been the bigger cunt. Oh, I should have said something. I should have said something, but I didn't because I'm trying to be a bigger person. And I think through fiction, that's when you can let it out and you can
Yeah.
finally feel like, hell yeah, I can do that thing that I was not allowed to do as a kid or say that thing that I'm not allowed to say ever. Um, so I don't know. I think for me, it is a selfish way of being able to do the things that I wish I could have.
No, I couldn't agree with that more because I think I that resonates with me too. It's like, man, I wish I'd had the balls to do that whenever I was younger because God knows I was thinking about it later, but for
hmm
whatever reason, I mean, just like socially we are told and trained to be toned down and, whatever. And I
hmm
really enjoy a narrative in which we don't have to, in a place where we don't have to.
hmm
And that Ronnie is that for me, honestly. Um, and to kind of,
Yes.
yes, to kind of lean into that, unfortunately, a lot of those feelings for Ronnie come from anger.
hmm
And, anger is such a palpable thing in this story, but whether it's experienced by her father, like Tommy, her brother, towards the family, at the
hmm
beginning of the novel, obviously, Ronnie, given everything that she experiences,
hmm
I just kind of want to open the floor for you to talk about the role of anger within What Hunger and what it means to you, this anger.
Ooh, I think anger is this family member that we're just never allowed to express. I think a lot of people, no matter who you ask, they're taught to bottle up their anger, not to express it, um, to choose the more pleasant reaction. And I do see in some Asian American families that, a lot of feelings are repressed,
Hmm.
which I don't think is very healthy. I think people are allowed to express themselves, and that's how you get it out in a healthy way. Um, but there is a thing about families being the most violent institutions. Like we are more violent to our own loved ones than anyone else because we assume that since there are blood relatives, there are family, we can hurl anything at them and they can take it, and vice versa. And I don't know, I think there's a lot of pent-up anger in families. And, we my family, like sometimes we apologize to each other, and sometimes it's like, we'll walk away, we'll come back and act like nothing happened. And, you're wondering, like, is this situation resolved? Has this anger been resolved? Are we fixing this conflict? And I, in most cases, I just find that this anger just keeps getting pent up and it needs an outlet. And when people are pushed to the edge, that's when it usually comes out in the ugliest of ways.
Yeah, I think that's really true. Like the idea of repression is just it's just recycled, right? Like it just
hmm
keeps showing up again and again and again. And I think that that's very true for everybody in Ronnie's
hmm
family. I mean, we just see these little blow ups until like finally there's a bigger one or like, a couple little things until it, really, really blows up and there's no ignoring it anymore. And I think
hmm
that you write that kind of like family. I don't know if dysfunction is the right word, but just that strange in between place that they're in because of their grief and their
hmm
anger. That there's just all of these little things that like whether it's how much her dad is drinking or how absent her mom is, like those things, those little pieces kind of build up to this bigger thing. And I think
hmm
it's really smart how you tell Ronnie's observation of those things. Because I think it's special. I say special. I mean, I think it's something that every kid goes through whenever you realize your parents are just as like fallible as you are. And like they are just as open to the same things that you are. And I think that part of the coming of age side of the story is that, and we're seeing her take in these things about her parents that she didn't really realize. Was that like the active like did you experience that whenever you were writing Ronnie? Like, oh, this is what this looks like for her.
Ooh, that is a very good question. Um, I don't know. I've always been very nosy about family history growing
Yeah.
up, and my parents have always been the complete opposite, where they're like, I don't remember anything. Like, it was fine. How was your childhood? It was good. Yeah, I played. Things happened. And so it always felt like I was like, I don't know, just like grasping at anything for any details about their lives growing up. But I don't think I don't think there was ever one moment where it hit me like, oh my God, my parents are people. I think it was more just over the years, just continually pestering them. And like sometimes I'd be in the car with one of my parents and they would just drop this like little tidbit, this little story from their own childhood. And I would just cling on to these little stories like, oh, I got to keep this piece of information because I'm never getting it again. Um, and I don't know, you start to see the different sides to a parent. I think growing up, I viewed my parents as more of like almost alien-like.
Mm, yeah.
Not that they're not my family, but it's like you exist, you're my parents, but I completely don't understand you. You don't understand me. We come from two entirely different planets in two different universes. Um, and I think that feels very heightened when you're a teenager. But I think through, these little tidbits I'd get from my parents, these little conversations, I would start to realize that, wow, my parents are like very flawed people. Or like, wow, my dad did some dumb shit in his youth. It's like, okay, okay, I see where the dumbness comes from. It's tied, it's been passed down from parent to child. And I'm not saying this in a derogatory way. I'm saying it like in a very self-aware, like, yo, we are slightly dumb. And I think that's what kind of, I don't know, it's this understanding that your parents are people
Hmm.
and also that you yourself are a piece of your parents and that you're turning into them slightly. I think that's the part that has not freaked me out the most, but like has impacted me the most. And I think that also shows up in the book where Veronica's talking to
Yes.
her parents and she tells her dad that like, oh, I act like you sometimes. Just, yeah, she has this awareness that her parents are people and she also is growing into, some of their traits.
Yeah, it's like the famous like wherever you go, there you are, and that's also your
Oh,
parents. Wherever you go, also they are, because you're gonna start seeing them in yourself. There's nothing
right.
quite. I think there's nothing quite like, and I think that the book taps into this as well. In specific, being a daughter and becoming part of your mother, and having that
Mm,
realization that you were more of her than you probably ever thought that you would be.
hmm.
Um, and I think it's really funny that, we have these moments like you like you mentioned, like I have pretty bad anxiety and for a long time I thought it was like, oh, my mom. But recently, getting to know my dad in adulthood, like me as an adult, I'm like, oh no, my guy, this is all from you. So
Oh my
so plot twist there. But no, I feel like it happens to everybody in different ways. And part of growing older and coming of age, whether it's, in your teen years or, like I'm in my 20s, going through this is like just
God.
learning that they are people too in different contexts. It's kind of like whenever you see your school teacher in like the supermarket and you're like, you're not supposed to be here. You only exist in the school.
Right, you live in this school. Why are you here?
Yeah, and then like you kind of realize like, oh, your parents also existed in a club once or like in a bar once or in the school, like in having that realization of like, oh yeah, we're not so disalike, you and I, for better or worse.
Yeah.
No, I feel like that's a very big theme in this book and one that I enjoyed immensely to see through Ronnie's eyes. Um, and to kind of pivot a little bit, there's another big component of this book, which is injustice, right? There
Hmm.
is, a lot of wrongs that Ronnie experiences, but you do a really good job of kind of like setting the expectation at the beginning of the novel whenever her and her brother stumble across, and this is not a spoiler, like this is a very mild scene, but they stumble across this like cage, this trap that has a squirrel in it, and the neighbors are trapping squirrels because they're worried that the squirrels are going to ruin their house or whatever. And the squirrel is like just trying to get out of this cage, even to its own detriment.
Hmm.
And that felt so tonally symbolic for the book and, the feelings of anger and like kind of telling us what to expect. I wanted to open up, and let you talk a little bit about that scene of the squirrel in the cage because it feels huge to me in the reader's seat. And so I'm curious how that looks for you as the writer.
Ooh. Um, well, my parents did have a squirrel problem at our house, and so my dad did get like a cage, and we did catch a squirrel, and we had never like caught an animal before, and just like watching its behavior and just watching it like kind of go crazy, where it's like biting at the cage wires, even as its teeth are starting to bleed. That's when you start to realize like, wow, this is a caged animal, and it really is going to choose death um, before anything else. And so I think that moment always struck with me,
Hmm.
and it felt horrific, and it felt very also like weirdly suburbia. So I put that in the book. But I do think that, yeah, like Ronnie also reacts in much the same way as the squirrel does. Like if she is, trapped somewhere, like say a car, she's not going to just take it lying down. She's going to do what she needs to do, even to her own detriment. Really like this kind of dichotomy between like Veronica being this like cannibal, raw, carnivore, meat eater person, but also having immense empathy for these little squirrels. Just the dichotomy between like the violence, but also the softness. She can have both assets to her personality.
Oh, 100%. And I think that the reasons that she feels that way are very relatable, I think is particularly for women. I think that like her anger in the directions that it's very warranted in the places that she does. And, she recognizes softness in certain places that I think that a lot of people do. And I
Hmm.
think the really interesting thing that we are having as a cultural moment, and I hate to say it, but I feel like it's because of Yellow Jackets, but the whole thing with cannibalism, I think it's such a great metaphor, symbol, whatever you want to call it, for like
Hmm.
all of these different things, right, that you're trying to communicate in media, in literature, and in whatever you want to call it. So I wanted to ask you about I mean, obviously you said it initially with your inspiration, how you landed on cannibalism, but like the greater role of cannibalism and your like relationship with this taboo kind of strange thing that's kind of become prominent within like our lexicon, I'd say.
It's crazy. I feel like in this year alone, there have been like three, four, five cannibal women stories that are coming out. I have no idea how the timing worked out like this. It's crazy. Um, but yeah, I think there's a metaphor for cannibalism and hunger in our very capitalistic society. Um, I think we all want a bunch of different things, but a hunger makes you more desperate. And what lengths will you go to sate that hunger? Um, I don't know. I think it ties into capitalism super well. But I don't know if I can like elaborate on this just because like I wrote the book and I'm like half the time I'm like, I don't know, I just wrote it. Um, but also you mentioned taboo. I
Hmm.
do think cannibalism is obviously it's a taboo subject, but people are very interested in it. Like I was at work and I was talking to like some people in HR at lunch and I told them about my book and it's just these very nice HR ladies that are like, "Oh, I think I read something about that. Oh, did you hear this one story about this one cannibal?" And that was just like a lunch break. And it was just very bizarre to me that all these like very pleasant women are just talking about the most gnarly, crazy thing. Um, but cannibalism also, I don't know how, but it seems to be this very you can make it digestible.
Hmm.
I think for me, like I tackled it from a very like familial, generational, you know, desperate situation angle. And I made it palatable because it's like cannibalism with a bit of tenderness and, you know, feelings. Whereas like I think there are some taboo subjects that I'm just like, you can't make this palatable. Like I mentioned this during one of my book talks. Um, incest.
Yeah.
Incest is I don't know why, but it's big on HBO.
Oh
Um,
yeah, no kidding. With Game of Thrones and everything else, yeah.
Game of Thrones, White Lotus.
Yep.
I don't know what like, and even though it's like a taboo thing, I don't think anyone can. How do you make it digestible?
Yeah. I have a feel like I do feel like in a few years, like sociologically speaking, we're gonna look back and we're gonna be like, when did cannibalism become palatable? Like, how did that happen? Because I do feel like there was a time that I had the same reaction to that kind of thing as I did like you said with incest. But
Mhm.
like we start introducing these like media pieces and then we start talking about it and it becomes much more much more relaxed and like casual. But I'm with you. I don't know if I can ever like fully understand the incest storytelling angle with, certain shows like The White Lotus and Game of Thrones and things like that. But I think with cannibalism in particular, it just says there's so much that you can say with it, right? Like,
Hmm.
and like you said, literally the book is called What Hunger? We are talking about craving and desiring righting wrongs, fixing injustices, being seen, knowing who you are, like all of these things that we all crave as people are all of these things that Ronnie craves.
Hmm.
So I agree. I think it's just it's a weird time because like I said, there was a time when it was taboo. It is no longer, I don't think. And I'm very curious as to what the hell is happening.
Honestly, like I sometimes wonder about the culture of like true crime and the fact that it's
Yeah.
all primarily like women, middle class women, non-criminal, like perfectly pleasant women who are drawn towards reading and watching things about serial killers and documentaries and all these like bloody, gory things. And I wonder if it's like almost cathartic in a way
Oh yeah.
where, our society keeps us so uptight. We have to behave and go to work and, fall in line. But to see that violence and the taboo, I'm like, is it a healthy outlet for us to get out like some of our pent up feelings or something? I feel like there's like a psychological angle that like neither of us can explain. But the true crime to cannibalism pipeline among women
Yeah.
is
I think it
it's
deserves some
there.
studying. I think it does deserve some studying. I do think though, like on that topic, because like I was real there was a time that I was really into true crime like that. Like I was very, whatever. And for me, it felt like
Hmm.
armoring up. Like, oh, I'm making myself aware of like what's out there. And like one of the worst things you can imagine is cannibalism. Like you die
Yeah.
and nobody knows what happens to you because somebody else consumes you. And so I guess maybe leaning into the idea of like oh, well, maybe if I'm aware enough of that, it won't happen to me. Like I'll be suited to deal with it. How you ever could be, I don't know. But it's
Right?
just
Like
like, it's the weird brain gymnastics that we all do whenever we, do these things. So I don't know.
yeah.
It's a very interesting cultural moment that I think that we're all in right now. However, whatever reason it is, whether it's true crime, whether it's Yellow Jackets, I don't know. So to move on a little bit, I want to go ahead and kind of, start wrapping up the conversation because we are getting kind of towards the top of the hour. Um, you already kind of answered this last question that I had whenever you told the story of the inspiration for the novel, but, the story that you tell that your mom told you does play a part in this book.
Hmm.
And I just, I wanted to ask how you landed on that being in the book, but like how did you work that in so seamlessly to this narrative? Because you mentioned how you thought it would be all these different things, like three separate stories, but it does come together rather seamlessly. So how did that happen?
Ooh, I think stylistically as an author, I just love long monologues. I love it when a character talks and when they share a good story. Um, and I think having a character in the book share the cannibal story, it made sense. It felt very natural. That's how I learned about it in real life. That's how I like to learn about stories. It's from hearing it from word of mouth from other people. Um, and yeah, I kind of pegged it as an urban legend that I thought
Hmm.
would be cool to share in the book. Um, but after I wrote What Hunger, I decided to do some research to see like, was this a real thing? Um, and it was crazy. I found like three articles from the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, dating back to like the late 1980s. Apparently there'd been like two or three incidents of cannibalism among Vietnamese boat refugees. Except the real stories, they always took place out at sea when people are stuck on this boat, the resources are out, and it kind of felt like Lord of the Flies, where
Yeah.
it's like some groups of people would like target other people and just straight up choose them to like sacrifice. There was one story where like a woman and a teenager were like drowned and then eaten. Um, and it was just horrific to know that like, oh, this stuff actually happened.
Yeah.
It's not just like a fake, boogeyman urban legend to scare people. Um, and there was one incident where the ringleader, he was called the ringleader. Um, he was interviewed by a journalist in an actual refugee camp in the Philippines, and he'd been accused of turning a bunch of men on the boat against other people and killing them and then eating them. And he straight up said like, I'm a Christian. I didn't do this because I wanted to. I did what had to be done, and I wasn't the ringleader. There were a bunch of us that were hungry, and we had to do this. But he had kind of gotten scapegoated and completely ostracized from the rest of the refugees at the camp. And so it was like reading that, and then just the line like I'm a Christian, like that
Hmm.
justification that like I'm a religious person, I'm a good person. I don't know. It felt like it tied in so well to the book that
Yeah.
I was shocked. I was like, "Oh wow, this is a little too real now." Um, but yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that, but I just had to sneak that
No.
in there.
No, absolutely. I think that it's absolutely, I don't want to say crazy because I don't think that it's crazy, but like really interesting that you found that, like that those stories are out there in that way that you
Hmm.
found them, multiple times over, might I add, in
Yeah,
various sources. That's
yeah.
yeah. No, life, I feel like the world is so small and like even creativity, like everybody says that like, oh, like so and so, well, so and so, and the world feels
Hmm.
really small because everybody knows everybody. But I do feel like there are these like really strange moments of creativity or like inspiration. And like we're not as alone as we think in our stances and our thoughts and our imaginings, whatever it is. And I feel like this is a really good example of that.
Yeah, honestly, and I don't know. I think it kind of hits home when it's like more recent. I
Hmm.
guess for me, like I grew up learning about the Donner Party and the
Yeah.
cannibalism that happened there. It's something that you picture like in more desperate situations, in more desperate ancient times. But to know that it happened so recently as the 80s, it's scary. It almost makes it feel like it could happen to us, possibly. Not that I would want it to happen to us, but when people are put in desperate situations, I think some people do choose to fight back and, you know, do what needs to be done. Um, and I don't know, humans have like crazy survival instincts.
No,
That's
I
all I'm gonna say
agree.
about that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah. And it feels so much farther away when it's, whatever year, but 1980s is a little too feels a little too close for comfort and in a reality
Right.
that we would know, right? Like that we would understand. So
Exactly.
I totally get that and I relate to that sentiment. So, well, this does wrap up most of my questions for What Hunger. Thank you so much for answering all of them and humoring all of like my little tangents about the book. I do want to ask you what the rest of your year looks like if you're still promoting the book, if you're going on tour, things like that. And if you're allowed to speak, if you are working on something, if you can talk about what you're working on now.
Ooh. Um, so I've only done two book events for What Hunger.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. I hear about like other book events that other authors have done, and sometimes the ROI is just not there.
Yeah.
So I was like, maybe if the book picks up steam, I'll make a stop in the South because I would love to go to Texas and do like a book event down there. But that's kind of up in the air. October, I'll be at USC,
Hmm.
speaking at this, I don't know how to explain this. It's like it's a panel hosted by Pulitzer Prize winning author Viet Thanh Nguyen. We'll be talking about the first Vietnamese novel that was translated into English and
Very
tying it into
cool.
our own works as part of the Vietnamese diaspora. So that's going to be super fun. Maybe not as horrific, like or horror based, but more like pedantic and Vietnamese based. And I think that's about it. I'm doing one other book event in Brooklyn, late September. I'll be moderating, uh, how do I say this? I'll be moderating an event among a bunch of debut authors that came out this year and
Yeah.
talking about their experiences being authors. Carrie Cullen is going to be one of the speakers. It'll be a super fun time.
Love Carrie.
I know, she's amazing. Um, as for other projects I'm working on, I kind of wasted the last year trying to write another mystery thriller and then kind of coming to terms with the fact that it was just like it's 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 uninspired. It's not that great. Um, but over the summer, I got a new idea for a horror novel. Um, I'm not going to spoil anything yet. Um, but I think it's tying into the horrors of modern day dating in
Oh,
New
hell
York
yeah. I love that.
and, finding the love of your life and what would you do for it? So I've been having a lot of fun with that. Fingers crossed that we can get it published. But yeah.
Absolutely. That sounds very fun. I mean, you said it was horror, but it still sounds fun to me.
Oh, it's
And
it's it's definitely more of a fun book than whereas like What Hunger is like a passion project.
yeah.
I think this next one is more fun based.
I gotcha. Well, I do think What Hunger, I think that that heart that you talk about, that passion project, is very palpable on the page. I mean, I was very affected by the book. I really, really loved it. I couldn't put the damn thing down. In fact, I don't think I got any work done at work the day that I
Oh
picked
my
it
God.
up. No, I really, really do love it, and I really hope that everybody goes out and picks it up. I just think it's one of those books that the emotions are so raw, forgive the pun, so raw on the page, but it's just, it's one of those very special, unique reads that cover so much ground with coming of age themes, anger, and just feeling like other and like who can't relate to feeling other at some point in their lives,
Mhm.
right? So, thank you so much again for answering all of my questions. Is there anything that you wanted to discuss or bring up before we close out that I did not mention already?
Ooh.
That's always like my
Who-
freebie question that I throw out there just to like make sure I didn't forget anything.
No, that's good. That's super good because now I'm like, I need to take my chance. Wait, I'm curious. Who is your favorite character in the book?
Um, I mean, obviously Ronnie is like, girl after my heart, but I really liked how headstrong Tommy was and how
Ah,
how you just like he had so much conviction in who he was and like what he stood for, and I really admired that. I also really loved their mom. Like by the end of it, like I don't know. I really enjoyed those. Those are the three that stick out. Ronnie above all else. Aspects of Tommy that just like really spoke to me, and then of course their mom and the way that I'm just gonna say the way that she shows up at the end of the novel is just chef's kiss perfection. Could not love it more, you know?
Yeah, no, I was just curious.
Yeah. Well, thank you again so, so much, Kat. This has been a lovely conversation. Everybody, What Hunger is already on shelves. Everybody should go pick it up. There will be a link in the show notes to this that you can order a copy. Thank you so much, Kat, once again.
Thank you for having me, Anna.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is my conversation with Catherine Dang, author of What Hunger. I had such a blast getting to talk to Kat. She is so personable, so relatable, and just like, I don't know, just this radiant ball of like creative energy. I think that she's one of the coolest people that I've had the chance to talk to, and I am so, so grateful that she came on the show to talk about What Hunger, especially because it's a book that I enjoy so, so much. If you need any more endorsement, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I haven't shut up about this book recently, so please go out, pick up a copy of What Hunger. It is phenomenal. Now, looking to next week, I am absolutely thrilled at the duo that I'll be sharing conversations with on Tuesday. I have the one and only Miss Alma Katsu, who I just think is like one of the coolest people in the world. I'm just going to come out and say it. I want to be her when I grow up. I think she's one of the most intelligent, um, creative, well-spoken, just like downright cool people that I've ever met. And then at the tail end of the week, we have our bonus episode, and that will be Mr. Jonathan Jans, also another favorite person of mine, somebody who just radiates positivity and joy every single time that I talk to him. I've never met anybody so enthusiastic about writing, the genre, just everything in general. He's such a nice guy, and I could not be more grateful that I got the chance to talk to both of them. So those episodes will be out next week. And until then, I will see you guys. Thank you all so much for all of your support, liking, sharing, all of that good stuff, per usual.